39,734 votes. 39,734 votes. Please welcome the new leader of Canada's NDP, le nouveau chef du NPD, Avi Lewis.
Canada, mark your calendar. The NDP comeback starts now.
Well, he's a filmmaker and now the man tasked with saving the federal New Democrats. Avi Lewis has taken the reins, but with some western wings of the party already distancing themselves. Is this a coronation or a coming civil war with the Alberta and Saskatchewan provincial party wings? Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew was on stage with Lewis following his victory, showing his support in the moment. Lewis, though, says he met with Kinew later, and you know what? They do have some areas of disagreement, especially on the energy file.
You know, there's a question of energy development, and it may be that if the port in the north, whether it's Churchill or somewhere else, ends up being the destination for more oil and gas exports, that's something that we in the federal NDP do not think serves Canadians. The energy economy is extremely unstable. Just go and try to fill up your car. It's more than $2 a liter for gas. This is a direct result of another illegal war for oil. And oil is driving the price shock that's coming. It's going to make the cost of living even harder. And we think that we need to accelerate the transition to a more stable, secure, and safe economy and a more independent Canadian economy, which actually means not shipping our raw resources elsewhere, but using Canadian materials to create good unionized Canadian jobs across all sectors. And renewable energy can be a major focus of major investments here. Wab and I might not sing exactly from the same song sheet on that issue, but that is one issue among many.
Yeah, the NDP is at a historic crossroads. This leadership shift determines whether the party remains a viable third option or retreats into a niche ideological movement. And Eddie, I don't know if you had a chance to catch any of the coverage on the convention on Sunday when they announced the vote totals, or even some of the convention coverage through the week. But first of all, some of the snippets I saw from the actual convention during the week where they were trying to debate policies and get resolutions passed was nothing short of a kook show. And I'm sitting there, and of course, the ultra right-wing forces on YouTube and other social media platforms are having a field day with some of the goings-on during the couple of days of party business that was being discussed on the floor of the convention center in Winnipeg. It was shameful. And the other side of it, when you look at Avi Lewis, comes from a political family. His grandfather, David Lewis, and then his father, who just passed away a few days after he won the leadership, Stephen Lewis, leader of the NDP in Ontario at one point, and a strong activist, and people from all sides saying that Stephen Lewis was one of the best speakers ever, that he would hold you in the palm of his hands forever and a day while he was delivering his message. A lot of background there, but Avi Lewis, activist, filmmaker, was a journalist for a while, and now here he is leading the NDP, trying to lead it out of one step away from oblivion. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it, quite frankly. He is, even for some left-wing types, he is far too extreme for them. There's going to be a real battle on both sides of the scales here, as far as the NDP is concerned. And, you know, they're 6 seats away from oblivion anyway, really, when you get right down to it. So what's going to happen? They may get through 3.5 years, but are they going to, during that time, is he going to be able to pull it all together and build a coalition within the West? Because the two party leaders out West in Alberta, within seconds of Lewis's being announced as the winner, firing out a social media message saying, we're distancing ourselves. We have nothing to do with the federal NDP and Avi Lewis. And the leader of the NDP in Saskatchewan, the same way. Not a good start.
Well, Gary, I caught snippets of the actual convention, and just the catcalling and jeering that I heard. I was a little taken aback by the unprofessional nature of the delegates there who were supposedly electing their leader in the NDP. He wanted with was it 56 or 57%. And right off the bat, I felt like Mr. Lewis was already starting with one foot in the grave, literally. I mean, like you had expressed, the NDP leader in Alberta, Nashit Nenshi, and then you had Carla Beck in Saskatchewan also representing the NDP. I mean, right off the bat, like you said, they were already starting to distance themselves. On a platform, on a national platform, where people are either watching this live or, like you and I, pick up on it thereafter on all the news feeds that are there. When you are carrying the orange flag of the NDP, you would at least expect some form of camaraderie amongst the banner that either provincial governments or the provincial leaders of their respective parties, like in this case the NDP, and the winner of the NDP leadership would at least align. Canoe at least did that, but you figure the rest of the pundits in the provincial side and all delegates would rally around him, at least from a PR perspective, to show some sort of unity. And right off the bat, I felt that that Mr. Lewis, right off the bat, got thrown under the bus with a lack of support and a lack of respect. We didn't see this when Pierre Poilievre won the convention. Yes, there were opponents there, and they, not necessarily may have voted for him, but they did show a genuine support after the fact. Same thing with Mark Carney. Not all the delegates voted for Mark Carney, but at the end of the day, everybody basically supported him, provincially and federally. I don't understand why this negativism. Could it very well be, Gary, that the previous leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, set a precedent of all this infighting federally and the lack of cohesion provincially because of that lack of leadership, that everybody's pretty much gone their own way and just went after their own political mandates using the NDP banner? Could that be it? I don't know, but I felt bad for Avi Lewis. He deserved better from his party members.
You have to have a tough political skin in order to go into these things and roll with situations like this. The other side of it is he knew what he was getting into. The fact that the party for the last year, Don Davis, who was appointed the interim leader and has been the interim leader of the party for the last 10 months, I thought did a phenomenal job for the NDP in that position.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm an NDPer, after watching everything that took place this past week, I'd be sitting there and asking myself, why didn't he run? Why? Why didn't he run? Although,
right.
When you look at Lewis's margin of victory, he polled 56% of the ballots cast, and it was over 70,000 ballots cast, which is a pretty strong mandate. But
it was just one ballot.
Yeah, exactly. Do these people realize just how far left that Lewis is and where he seems to want to go and take the party as far left as possible? And as I say, when you reflect upon some of the antics on the convention floor during the couple of days of party business, I was just flabbergasted. You could have knocked me over with a feather. I expect some things from the NDP, but this was ratcheted up a couple of notches for sure. And certainly looking at it from my perspective, and that doesn't mean that I'm right. But if I was trying to decide what to do, then I would just give up and just walk away and maybe try and figure out if I'm going to go liberal or go conservative, because there's no way. Now, Lewis seems to be a smart guy, very good speaker. Will he see what's going on and be able to figure it out? I don't know. That remains to be seen.
The comment I wanted to make about the NDP, I'm feeling that Avi Lewis is starting with one foot in the grave, and he's got a big job getting the rest of the candidates on the same program with him. It does seem to be a little bit far left to my liking as a voter, but nonetheless, he's got to get his group on the same page with him. And as you mentioned, he's a good communicator, and he's got to effectively start doing that. And first things first, he's got to get himself a seat. So I from what I've seen, it looks like that he's just waiting for the right opportunity and the correct writing to implement himself and essentially win a seat and become an effective member of parliament. Right now, he's just a lame duck out on the side. The second thing is, once he actually gets his seat, he's got a long way to go, Gary, to go from the embarrassing 6 seats they won the last election to actually have an impact in Parliament when you've got heavyweights such as the Liberal Party, the Progressive Conservatives, and the Bloc Québécois, which takes a lot of votes. And he's got big shoes to fill. I mean, if you think back, Jagmeet Singh, and behind that, you're looking at Thomas Mulcair, and before that, Jack Layton. Gary, those are more seats to fill. And the last time the NDP were able to have some sort of an influence in Parliament was in 2015 when Thomas Mulcair got 44 seats, at least in the Liberal majority government. He got his 44 seats. But if you remember, prior to that, in 2011, Jack Layton won a whopping 103 seats in that particular federal election. And I'm not embarrassed to say, that's the first time and only time I voted NDP, and I was really proud of my vote here in Quebec. So there was a major orange wave in the province of Quebec by Jack Layton, and he played it very smart, if I recall. He didn't go too far left. He basically played common sense politics, where with common sense, he went left, he went right in terms of his platform. So we expect Avi Lewis to dent the Canadian political landscape to the level of Mulcair and Jack Layton back in 2015, 2011. Gary, quite honestly, I think it's going to be an impossible climb for him to make based on A, what we saw in the convention in Winnipeg, and B, right off the bat, we had Alberta and Saskatchewan basically saying, well, we don't want to have anything to do with him. And I think a lot of it has to do with his, being against any further expansion of energy. It's one of the things that he actually campaigned on, is his views about a stagnated energy program across the country, when today, considering what the USA has put the world through with the Middle East and whatnot, capping energy programs is probably not the right thing to do or the right thing to say if you want to have any sort of impact in Canadian politics, Gary. So the man, great communicator. I love the way he speaks. He's got a long way to go in this party, the National Democrat Party of Canada, and a long way to go in this country until the next election. In another 3.5 years, another 3 years before one is officially mandated by our constitution, or if something happens before that, that one gets called. He's got a big hill to climb, in my opinion.
Well, you mentioned about his energy and policies, and he mentioned that in the clip we had, where that's one area where he butts heads with Wab Kinew. However, he's also out there talking about getting into public supermarkets, pulling our food distribution system over to public hands. And then that one, I understand firing a warning shot across the bow. However, the reality of it is, does he not realize how long it would take to get a government-controlled, run supermarket system set up in this country and have it run efficiently? And if you think the prices will be any cheaper, I don't think so, unless they run huge deficits and just keep piling on to the overall deficit. There's absolutely no way that you're going to convince me that can be achieved and be successful. And he's also talking about grabbing the territory of Bell, Telus, and Rogers and taking over cell phone, TV, internet, and turning that public. Again, can you imagine what would be involved there? And, just now, that just popped into my mind, would it come out to a point where he makes them public, but then turns it back over to the three big guys to run on behalf of the government? Can you imagine the kind of mess that would be? The threat of turning a service public is one thing, but to be more focused than using it as a threat, and where you should be turning your attention is regulation and enforcing the regulation that's on the books now and refining the regulation so it works better on behalf of all parties. You can have all kinds of regulations on the books, but if you don't enforce those regulations, then what's the point?
He's thinking about nationalizing company. He's talking about nationalizing companies here in Canada. And nationalization of companies doesn't typically go easily, or it doesn't work at all. When was the last time Canada had a crown corporation that was mega profitable?
I don't know. I would venture to say not in my lifetime. There may have been one small one or a couple of small ones, but I can't pull any examples off the top of my head, Eddie, to be quite honest. And I could be wrong. And if somebody is aware of any, pop them into the comments so we know. But I can't think of any. And let's look at a couple of things. Air Canada was privatized, and it's doing well. Prior to that, I don't know. It was doing okay, but should the government be in the business of running an airline? No. Should the government be in the business of providing telecoms services? No. Should the government be in the business of funding the CBC to $1.6 billion a year without any real accountability? No. And is the CBC not only taking $1.6 billion a year from the government, but also selling ads for public television at the expense of private broadcasters? Should they be doing that? No. So the history of publicly run corporations ain't great in this country. why would we be all of a sudden starting to talk about this sort of a tact again? I can't buy into it. I just can't buy into it. Now, you mentioned something about him being on the outside. Right, he doesn't have a seat. One thing he did do, he met with the caucus Sunday afternoon, and they had quite a discussion apparently, and he says that the caucus agreed that instead of him looking for a seat to get into the House at the moment, that his time right now would be better spent going coast to coast to coast, meeting with people as he did while running for the leadership campaign, or handling his leadership campaign, which he's been working on since September 25th, I think it was when he launched it. Anyhow, they want him, and he agrees, or he wants to, and they agreed. Anyway, the agreement was that he would continue going across the country, meeting with people face to face, trying to rebuild those party connections in that manner and do some fundraising, because he raised over $1 million for his campaign, which is not anything to laugh at, especially on the New Democratic side of things. So, and they've lost their official party status, so they're on life support at best. So they need money. And if he can go out and raise the money, great, because between a couple of the people that they have within their caucus, including Don Davis, who's been the leader, the interim leader for 10 months, and as I said earlier, did what I thought was a decent job, they can handle it. You go off and get the cash flowing in and meet the people, press the flesh, smile, kiss babies, get your picture taken while doing it, and move on. And I don't know, maybe they're also hoping that
Right.
will kind of keep him and his ideas away from them to a degree. Could be, who knows? Anyhow, so that's what's going to happen. He's not really focusing on trying to get into the House of Commons anytime soon. Or at least that's what he said on Monday. We didn't really talk a lot about was the fact that he did win by a significant margin, 56%, on the first ballot. There were mail-in ballots from across the country in addition to the people at the convention voting. I don't know if he managed to touch a lot of New Democrats that have been kind of in the shadows in the past, and now they're coming out because they like what they're hearing from him. But at what cost? Is that going to cost support on the other side of the NDP? I think it will, and you're already seeing it with the way how quickly Alberta and Saskatchewan parties reacted to his election as leader. Sorry, see you. Nice knowing you, but
True.
we're moving on. So there's not only does he have to really work at getting the NDP name out in front of people again and trying to entice people to come on board with their support and their financial support. I think that that's going to be a real challenge. I think the 70 some odd thousand people who voted in that leadership vote, I think that's his base, and I think that's it.
Yeah, like I had mentioned, he's got a tall hill to climb. And right off the bat, as you mentioned, you had Alberta and Saskatchewan basically saying, I don't think so, at least for now, but we can always discuss things. If you think about it, wouldn't you want to leverage and get on board some of the provincial NDP powerhouses that exist today? I mean, let's call a spade a spade. You had David Eby out in British Columbia, who's NDP. Of course, you have Manitoba with Wad Canoe, right? And then you look at some of the other havens where you have an NDP present provincially. You've got Alberta, you've got Saskatchewan, you have Ontario, you have Nova Scotia, and you've got Yukon, which are all the official opposition. We're not talking about the conservatives. We're not talking about the liberal. We're talking about 5 jurisdictions, provincial jurisdictions, where the NDP is the official opposition. That's nothing to sneeze at, Gary. Do you not think the federal NDP and Avi Lewis, it would behoove them to leverage the successes of these particular jurisdictions and the leaders in these jurisdictions to try to get them on board to a common plan where he can essentially not insure himself a ticket in those provincial ridings during a federal election, but at least to get the constituents that are already voting NDP in these ridings to look at what an NDP federally can do for them. If I was the leader of the NDP, that's certainly what I would do. Yes, you know what? I agree with the plan of his campaign management and his caucus. That now is the time to go out there and door to door if you have to, meet and greet people and tell them, here, I'm the new NDP. But by the same token, he cannot lose sight of the fact that there is a presence of NDP in provincial jurisdictions. And you have to be able to leverage those particular leaders of the opposition and those provinces and get them on board with federal programs and support you. And that way you assure yourself a better chance of winning those votes come the next federal election. Don't you think?
Well, there's no question he needs that support right across the country. And David Eby in BC, the NDP in BC always been a force. Eby right now, though, I think is burning up his political capital to a degree. I think his popularity has plunged significantly, but still he's a government in power. No question about that. And as you say, you go across the country and you have Wab Kinew, who probably is, well, he is, I believe, in the last poll, was the most popular premier in the country. And he just has a way about him where even the Americans stood up and took notice of what he said about there's one way to get gas prices down, and that is for President Trump to end this foolish war with Iran. And the Americans, like the American media, picked up on that comment. So he's not afraid to speak his mind by any stretch of the imagination, but he also has a very, very positive aura about him whenever he is in front of a camera or on stage, or even in the legislature. So yes, definitely, there are things to build upon there that Lewis can take advantage of if he wants to. And on the other side of it is, if the others are willing to meet Lewis halfway. And unless Lewis has come to Jesus moment where he realizes, hey, you know what, I've got to temper some of these things I'm saying because they're really not resonating with a large chunk of not only NDP supporters, but anyone else out there who may be sitting on the sidelines and at some point, the undecided. Which way are they going to go? And then you had the soft NDP support, a lot of it which went over to the Liberal side and some of it to the Conservative side. So he does have a significant mountain to climb, no question. He's going to have to tone it down and become a little more, I hesitate to use the term mainstream, but he needs to appeal to a broader cross-section and not to that very narrow 56% of the people who cast ballots for the leadership, the NDP leadership vote. He's got to get beyond that 56%. And Eddie, I'm not sure if his caucus is totally sold.
That comes down to political experience.
That's what it comes down to. And as I say, I'm not sure if his caucus is totally sold on what they're seeing. And that can go against you in a big way as well.